Listen to this conversation. Generous, laughing, comfortable, talking about parties with a man who is now facing federal charges that have shocked the entire entertainment industry. Now, listen to what one of her own employees said about her the moment the cameras stopped rolling.
Liar, hypocrite. That's my reaction. She's known about this for 17 years. She's created this culture. I was there from day one. We were all petrified of her.
And now, while 3 million pages of Epstein documents are being picked apart by investigators, lawmakers, and the entire internet, her name has entered that conversation.
Looks pregnant, reacting to a photo. And the client replies back to Epstein, "You mean radiating a soft glow with the look of bliss and excitement? Yeah, that's the pizza."
And here's what nobody is connecting. The moment those files went public, the moment Ellen's name entered that orbit, Portia de Rossi reportedly started making her exit quietly, deliberately, and permanently. Today, we are pulling every single thread. Let's go back to the beginning, because before we get to the Epstein files, before we get to the divorce, before we get to the financial fallout that could be unlike anything Hollywood has ever witnessed, you need to understand what this relationship actually was to the public, what it meant, what it symbolized, and why the unraveling of it hits so differently than your average celebrity split. Portia de Rossi and Ellen DeGeneres didn't just get married, they became a cultural monument. When same-sex marriage was legalized in California in 2008, they were among the very first couples to walk down that aisle. Magazine covers, award show, red carpets, talk show appearances. They were the couple that other couples were compared to, the gold standard, the proof that love could look like that. Glamorous, stable, joyful, built to last. For 15 years, that image held. And then in February of 2023, Portia did something that, in retrospect, feels almost unbearably poetic. She organized a surprise vow renewal for their 14th anniversary. She wore the exact same Zac Posen gown from their original 2008 wedding Kris Jenner officiated. Jennifer Aniston was standing in that room. It was the kind of Hollywood moment that gets written up as a fairy tale, and everyone bought it because it looked perfect. But here's the thing about perfect pictures. The most carefully framed ones are usually hiding the most, because while Portia was standing in that gown, smiling in front of cameras, she had already been privately fighting battles for years that the public had no idea about. She has spoken about this candidly, bravely, in her memoir, Unbearable Lightness, and in various interviews, about her decades-long struggle with eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and the complete erosion of her own personal identity. At her lowest, she was dangerously underweight. She was disappearing, physically, psychologically, and professionally, inside someone else's much louder life. Think about that for a moment. While Ellen was the most powerful daytime television host on the planet, Portia de Rossi, a genuinely talented, genuinely accomplished actress, was being described everywhere, in every article, in every headline, as Ellen's wife, Ellen's partner, Ellen's other half. Her own career, her own talent, her own identity, perpetually swallowed by the gravitational pull of someone else's fame. One insider described it this way, and I want you to sit with this quote. Portia tried to be Ellen's biggest supporter, but the stress was overwhelming. She started questioning if this was the life she wanted to live. Not in the last year, not after the Epstein files. For years. The cracks were already there. They were just invisible to everyone who wasn't inside that house. Now, let's talk about 2020, because everything that is happening right now, the divorce, the financial collapse of Ellen's brand, the Epstein proximity, none of it makes full sense without understanding what happened in that summer. In the middle of a global pandemic, 36 former employees of the Ellen DeGeneres show came forward, independently, consistently, and what they described was not a difficult boss, not a demanding creative environment. What they described was a system, an intentional, sustained, engineered culture of fear, harassment, racial discrimination, and silence. Senior producers were accused of misconduct. Staff members described being too frightened to even speak to each other about what they were experiencing. BuzzFeed News published the investigation. Warner Brothers launched a formal internal review. Executive producers were removed from their positions, and Ellen, the woman whose entire brand, whose entire identity was built on the phrase "be kind," was forced to sit in front of her audience and attempt an explanation.
Liar, hypocrite. That's my reaction. She's known about this for 17 years. She's created this culture. I was there from day one. We were all petrified of her.
5 words. Things happened here. Passive voice, no ownership, no specificity. The critics weren't moved, and the reason they weren't moved becomes devastating when you hear from the people who actually lived through it.
It's like really weird and not nice to me for most of my career, and like because I opened for her in the 1980s.
Oh, you did?
When she was a headliner in comedy clubs, and not way before her big fame.
Uh-huh.
And so then when I would do her talk show in the 2000s, she acted like we just met. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? Like, that's what.
That person was there from day one, not a disgruntled late hire, someone who watched the entire architecture of that show get built. And what they're saying is that the fear, the silence, the intimidation, it wasn't a management failure that crept in over time. It was baked into the foundation from the beginning. And it wasn't just internal employees speaking out. A former cameraman who worked on the show spoke to the Daily Mail and described a turnover rate so extraordinary that in a single season, the production went through nine different stage managers. He described a feeling among the male staff that Ellen simply didn't want men working in close proximity to her. And he introduced a phrase that has taken on a life of its own in online spaces, one he used to describe the look Ellen would give to anyone who had displeased her. He called it the Ellen gaze. According to him, when she was unhappy, her eyes would narrow, her expression would go cold, and she would look at the person who had crossed her with what he described as a queen looking at her next execution. That is a chilling description, and it is the exact opposite of the dancing, laughing, warm-hearted personality that millions of people invited into their homes every single morning. Now add that to what someone from outside the show said, someone with no financial stake, no axe to grind, no employment grudge to settle.
You know, the crew really appreciated the pizza. Another email read, "This is better than a Chinese cookie, see attached. Let's go for pizza and grape."
Margaret Cho opened for Ellen in comedy clubs in the 1980s. Before the show, before the brand, before any of this. She knew Ellen before the fame, and what she described is a woman who, when the cameras turned on and the audience was watching, could look right through someone she'd known for decades and pretend they were a stranger. That's not a management style. That's a mask. And when you hold that up against everything the employees described, you start to see the shape of something that runs very, very deep. Now, picture Portia inside that world every single day for 15 years. Here's where this story crosses into entirely different territory. For years, anyone who asked questions about the true scope of Jeffrey Epstein's network, beyond the officially acknowledged charges, beyond the plea deal, beyond the documented victims, was dismissed, called a conspiracy theorist, told the story was closed, the truth was known, and there was nothing more to see. And then the files dropped. 3 million pages, released to investigators, researchers, lawmakers, and eventually the public. And what those pages revealed was not a closed story. It was a story in the earliest possible chapter of being told. Now, before we go any further, I want to do something that the most viral versions of this conversation consistently fail to do. I want to be precise, because precision matters here, and the lack of it is causing real damage to real conversations that actually need to happen. Here is what one researcher covering the files described, and this is important context. Ellen DeGeneres' name appears in the Epstein documents. That part is real. Her name surfaces in the broader index of over 300 high-profile individuals, referenced across the investigative materials. Flight logs, communications, third-party interviews, peripheral records. But, and this is the part that gets deliberately buried in the most sensational versions of this story, being referenced in an investigative file is not the same as being accused of a crime. There are names in those files that appear simply because a third party mentioned them. There is, as of now, no document in the Epstein files that formally accuses Ellen DeGeneres of any illegal activity. That needs to be in this conversation. It needs to be said clearly. What also needs to be in this conversation, with equal clarity, is what is in those files, because the documented material is alarming enough on its own, without anything needing to be invented. Epstein's private communications revealed an inner circle that appears to have operated in a deliberate language of misdirection. Ordinary words, used in contexts that made no logical sense as ordinary words. Food references appearing in emails that weren't about food. Phrases about pizza, about grape soda, about beef jerky, about muffins. Not in recipes, not in restaurant reservations, in communications between powerful people about other people.
She looks pregnant, reacting to a photo. And the client replies back to Epstein, "You mean radiating a soft glow with the look of bliss and excitement? Yeah, that's the pizza."
These were not internet theories. These were documents reviewed by sitting members of the United States Congress.
Most political leaders don't come out of a background of finance. Most political leaders come out of a background of being popular. So in some of the countries, in some of the African countries, for example, they might have been a military person. They were a general. Or in our country, they would have been an actor. The knowledge of money they don't have expertise, they have no degrees in finance. They really, and this is one of the major problems. So many world leaders who don't really have a financial underpinning make fundamental errors when it comes to money.
Anna Paulina Luna stated publicly that the language was disturbing, that the context made innocent interpretations of those food references impossible to maintain, and that one term in particular appeared to function as a euphemism for something significantly darker than takeout orders. Now, let's add something that the general public conversation largely hasn't gotten to yet. The footage actually embedded in those files. Videos, real ones. We've reviewed some of them. There's footage of what appears to be an older man in a blue sweater with 3 other individuals, 2 of them redacted by the DOJ to protect their identities, watching a woman dance. There's footage of a redacted individual apparently modeling in a bikini. There's footage of Epstein himself in kitchen spaces in social settings that reads completely differently now than it would have before you understand what those spaces were allegedly used for. And then there's the interview. Hours of footage of Steve Bannon sitting down with Jeffrey Epstein in 2019, allegedly intended to help rehabilitate Epstein's image, in which Epstein holds court about Wall Street, about world leaders, about power, about money, with the casual confidence of a man who genuinely believed the rules did not apply to him.
Well, I was in a place what's called the Special Housing Unit, which is for the roughest, toughest, meanest people. They had put me there, they said, for my own protection.
There's also his account of his time in prison after his 2008 guilty plea. Solitary confinement, an 8x10 cell, a chrome sink, a slit in the door for food trays, delivered with the same detached man who pleaded guilty to soliciting a minor for prostitution, describing his prison experience like a consultant recounting a difficult business quarter and the world he moved through, the parties, the islands, the private jets, the carefully curated guest lists. That world overlapped at multiple documented points, with the world Ellen DeGeneres occupied at the absolute peak of her fame and influence. Let's talk about the specific connections that have kept Ellen's name circulating in these online spaces, because this is where the conversation gets genuinely complicated. The most direct, most documented, most unavoidable link that researchers and online investigators keep returning to is Diddy Sean Combs, who is currently facing federal charges that have sent visible tremors through the entertainment industry and prompted a long, uncomfortable reassessment of what certain relationships and certain social rituals in Hollywood actually looked like behind closed doors. Ellen and Diddy were not strangers. They were not distant acquaintances who crossed paths at an industry event once. They were warm. They were comfortable. They had the kind of easy, familiar chemistry that only comes from genuine, repeated social proximity.
I wouldn't eat or wouldn't drink or wouldn't try. If the person okayed it, I would eat a human.
Listen to that conversation again with fresh ears. The casual mention of after parties. The inside joke about a different type of party. The easy reference to taking over the top 2 floors of a hotel and carrying the night forward. That comfort, that warmth, that laughter. It reads very differently now than it did when the footage was originally filmed. And one clip in particular kept reappearing in those threads. A clip from Chrissy Teigen, who had for years occupied the same social circles, attended the same events, been connected to many of the same names now generating headlines.
About to sound completely insane, but just hear me out. This pertains to the Epstein files, the Clintons, and cannibalism, and I feel completely fine and am totally okay. Alright, let's do this. How do we know if someone is a cannibal? Well, they could have the Kuru disease, which is a fatal neurodegenerative disease that spreads through eating brain tissue. It has a long incubation period, 10 to 30 years. Early symptoms are headaches, coordination issues, anxiety, and inappropriate laughter. Middle stage, severe tremors and shaking, loss of balance, and slurred speech. Late stage, inability to walk, dementia, and the forever sleep. Do you know of any elites rumored to have consumed human flesh? But I'm not accusing anyone of anything, this is just a fun little joke video. With truth in the mix, in Papua New Guinea they call human long pig. We just love to have fun here. No, the Kuru disease has nothing to do with the Epstein files, or anyone in them. Definitely not the Clintons. And I feel fantastic, so yeah.
At the time, most people filed that under the category of dark Hollywood humor, a provocative joke from a provocateur. But after the Epstein files, after the coded language revelations, after the food references in those communications took on their reported meaning, people stopped laughing it off. And they started asking why anyone at that level, in that world, in that specific cultural moment, would reach for that particular joke. Now, I have to tell you about another layer of this story, one that veered, and I want to be upfront about how strange this is going to sound, into genuinely bizarre bizarre medical territory. When old footage of Epstein himself surfaced showing unusual physical movements, tremors, irregular facial expressions, coordination issues, certain corners of the internet began connecting it to a rare neurological disease called Kuru, first documented among tribes in Papua New Guinea, caused by the consumption of human brain tissue, with an incubation period of anywhere from 10 to 30 years, and early symptoms that include coordination issues, anxiety, and what medical literature describes as episodes of inappropriate laughter.
I got kicked out of show business.
Now, I am going to be completely direct with you. You cannot diagnose a neurological condition from a short video clip. Medical professionals are unambiguous about that. Kuru has nothing to do with the Epstein files, as a factual matter, and no credible investigative body has suggested otherwise. But here is what is true, and it's important. The most viral, most sensational version of this story, the one claiming the Epstein files reveal Ellen DeGeneres as, and I'm quoting the actual post here, Hollywood's most prolific cannibal, a vampire, a participant in underground rituals, that version is completely fabricated. Community Notes flagged it. The documents contain nothing even remotely close to supporting it. Someone invented it, it was outrageous enough to go viral. And now millions of people have encountered it, presented as established fact, and here's why that actually matters in a way that goes beyond just protecting Ellen DeGeneres' reputation. When you flood the conversation around real investigative documents with fabricated cannibal conspiracies, you hand a weapon to every single person in those files who has something real to hide. You make it possible to dismiss anyone who raises legitimate questions as someone who believes in vampires. You don't just misinform the people who believe the fake version, you discredit the people trying to talk about what's genuinely in those pages. That is how disinformation operates at its most sophisticated and most damaging level. The real material in those files is serious enough, the coded language, the flight logs, the communications, the third-party testimony, Ellen's name appearing in that broader index of over 300 individuals. All of that is documented, all of that is real, and all of that deserves to be discussed seriously, which becomes significantly harder when the loudest voices in the conversation are talking about cannibals. Now, put yourself in Portia de Rossi's position. You are 15 years into a marriage that the world has used as a symbol of love and commitment and progress. You have spent those 15 years managing your own private battles, the eating disorder, the body dysmorphia, the slow, quiet erosion of knowing who you are outside of someone else's identity. You have been Ellen's wife in every article, every headline, every introduction at every event for a decade and a half. You stood by her in 2020 when BuzzFeed published that investigation, when 36 employees came forward, when the people who had worked for her for years described a culture of fear and intimidation. You posted your support, you maintained the united front, you kept showing up, you renewed your vows in the same dress in front of Kris Jenner and Jennifer Aniston and everyone. You performed the fairy tale one more time because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. And then the Epstein files drop, and suddenly the conversation isn't about management style anymore. It isn't about a toxic workplace or a difficult boss or a comedian who forgot to be kind. The conversation shifts into something fundamentally different, something darker, something with implications that extend far beyond a BuzzFeed investigation or a Warner Brothers review. Her name is in those documents. The social connections are being documented and cross-referenced publicly by millions of people. The Diddy proximity, the coded language, the Musk implication, the relocation, all of it landing at once. The show ended. The endorsement deals evaporated one by one. The Netflix stand-up special arrived to mixed reviews, critics acknowledging her comedic instincts while noting that she seemed more interested in positioning herself as a victim of cancel culture than in engaging with genuine accountability.
Together and talking about kind science, as we do every Saturday morning.
That's how she characterized it. Kicked out. Not a word about the 36 employees. Not a word about the culture. Just a punchline that cast herself as the one who had been wronged. Her wealth has taken measurable, documented hits since 2020. Her brand, once one of the most commercially valuable in the history of American entertainment, has been quietly deflating for years. And California's community property laws do not care about any of that context. In California, assets accumulated during a marriage are split equally, presumptively by default, unless a valid prenuptial agreement specifically says otherwise, and sources have not confirmed that any such agreement exists between Ellen and Portia. If it doesn't exist, or if it doesn't hold up, we could be looking at a division of hundreds of millions of dollars, not because of a criminal conviction, not because of a jury verdict, because the woman who spent 15 years beside her finally decided she'd carried enough, and it doesn't stop at personal assets. The Kind Science skincare line, the one they launched together, the one that was marketed as a shared shared passion project, a joint venture built on mutual love and creativity. A former employee who was present from the very beginning called her a liar and said the staff was terrified of her. A former cameraman described an atmosphere of intimidation so sustained and pervasive that he felt compelled to name the specific expression she used to enforce it. A peer who knew her for decades before any of the fame described watching Ellen look right through her as if they'd never met. And the woman who spent 15 years beside her, through the fame, through the scandal, through the apology, through the vow renewal, through all of it, has reportedly made her final decision and is walking away. The Epstein files didn't end this marriage. The workplace scandal didn't end this marriage. The Diddy connection didn't end this marriage. But all of it together, layered on top of 15 years of one person slowly disappearing inside another person's identity, 15 years of private struggle, 15 years of maintaining a united front through storms that kept getting larger, all of it together created a weight that reportedly became impossible to carry. Portia de Rossi is done carrying it, and Ellen DeGeneres is left standing in the wreckage of a reputation, a marriage, and a cultural moment that she spent 2 decades constructing, facing the possibility that the people who were closest to her, who saw all of it, who lived inside it, already know exactly how the story ends. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Portia has already finalized her decision? And do you believe that Ellen's name entering the Epstein conversation, regardless of what is or isn't ultimately proven, is damage she can ever actually come back from, because the people who were in her corner the longest seem to have already answered that question?